So, you've just been diagnosed with autism, or you've just found out that you might be autistic. Now what? Hello people of the internet, I'm Jontje and I'm autistic myself, and by the end of this video, you will hopefully know what to do after being diagnosed with autism or ASC or ASD or autism level 1 or 2 or Aspergers or... Hold on, that's a lot of terms. Yes, there are a lot of terms. And it can be a bit confusing, to be honest. And sometimes people can get angry at you for using one over the other for seemingly no apparent reason. And that brings me to my first bit of advice, which is research. Find out whatever you can find out about autism. You can start with the term that you've been diagnosed with and just read, honestly. Read medical articles, read scientific papers, read self-help books, read whatever you can find and want to read. But while you're reading, keep in mind that there are a lot of different opinions out there about autism and the causes and what exactly we should do now that we know it exists, or maybe about its existence in general. And so don't just go with the first opinion that you encounter, and keep an open mind. You may also want to read or listen to some personal accounts on various social media, and maybe even meet some like-minded people. On most social media you will find the Actually Autistic hashtag, which on Tumblr and Twitter I am active on as well. And that's generally a very good place to start. Although, again, keep in mind that we use very specific terminology which you might want to familiarize yourself with before you start posting on them as well. And I'm not saying that at all to keep you from posting on those hashtags, but the truth is that many of us on there have spent quite a long time researching autism and thinking about autism, and sometimes we forget that not everyone has the same insight yet. So some of us can become a bit rude because you've used terminology that they may find unacceptable or even insulting. But please don't let that discourage you from learning about this community. Before I move on, I have one last suggestion for reading material, and that is fiction books with autistic protagonists. Now, these may be few and far between, but I am in fact planning to make a video about my personal favorites, so stay tuned for that. So, once you know a little bit about autism and have maybe also already discovered a thing about or two about yourself, you might want to start thinking about how you want your diagnosis to affect your life, or whether you want it to affect you at all. So maybe right now you feel like you want to tell absolutely everyone you meet about your autism diagnostic because it just explains so many things and you've been learning so much about yourself and all of that is just amazing. And sadly, let me just caution you a little bit on that, because not everyone you meet is going to see it the same way. Some people might even question you about whether you have autism or not, or they might deny that autism exists at all. And that can really be quite disheartening. So it pays to keep that in mind and to maybe even have a plan for when it happens to you. So especially if it is someone close to you who's reacting like that. Now, on the other hand, you might feel quite ashamed about your autism diagnosis, and you might feel the need to hide the traits of yourself that you perceive to be autistic even more than usual. And that's okay as well. We get told so often to hide and be ashamed of certain traits of ourselves that it's really quite a normal reaction. Just take some time, maybe read some positive accounts of other autistic people, and maybe talk about it with someone you're close to, or maybe even with the person who diagnosed you. And just know that sometimes getting comfortable with knowing something new about yourself can take quite a while. But there are other ways that knowing that you're autistic might impact your life. You might, for example, think about some things that you may want to change even without telling anyone that you're autistic. You might, for example, decide to wear your headphones out in public more because they just make dealing with noise so much more comfortable. Or you might decide to just watch that movie you've already seen 100 times instead of that new series that everybody's been recommending because, gosh dang it, you just need to relax right now. And before we move on to the last step, there's one last thing you might want to ask yourself, and that is, do you want accommodations? Now, you don't need to run out and get them the next day. In fact, I recommend that you don't. But getting accommodations at work or at university or wherever does warrant very careful consideration, because it is a very vulnerable thing to do, to ask for accommodations, because you are disclosing that you're autistic, or in fact that you are just different in a way that warrants accommodations to someone who has quite a lot of power over you. So that should be considered very, very carefully. And also the process of getting accommodations can take quite a lot of time in some countries. So it's a very good idea to start thinking about that early, so that if you are ready to ask for them, you will know what to do, and you don't need to do another 3 months of research to even find out what exactly it is that you need to do. And the last step, the third idea that I want to share with you, is that you specifically seek out some of your autistic traits. And now this is the part of the video where I start using a lot of terms from the autism community. So if you have absolutely no idea what's going on, there will be definitions in the description. Something you might want to try, and in fact something that is sometimes even recommended by psychologists or therapists who specifically work with autistic patients, is that you specifically seek out your stims, or that you try to relearn stimming. And I will actually be making a video about this, so if you have absolutely no idea where to start, tune in next Tuesday, because I will be talking about exactly that. So you could also seek out your special interests more, or try to find out what your special interests are. And sometimes it pays to think back to your childhood and to the things that you were interested in then. Your interests might not always survive 100% from childhood, but often it is, at least for me, I find that it is similar things to the special interests that I had as a child that I have now. And you might also want to try owning up more to the difficulties that you have being autistic. You might, for example, allow yourself to ask questions that you've previously been afraid to ask, or told weren't necessary, questions, or you might want to think about finding alternatives to some things that you may have sensory difficulties with. And on the topic of autistic traits, you might also want to look up something called masking. And in fact, I'm going to leave a link to another video in the description, which explains it much better than I could here in a half a minute or so. So with that, I hope that you now have more of an idea of what you might want to do now. And I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope that becoming aware that you're autistic will be a step towards a more worthwhile and enjoyable life for you. And if you know someone who might benefit from this video, share it with them, like it, and comment with what you want to do now. I want to know. And I will see you again soon. Bye!